get Cab Calloway on it?
Des assiettes sont des
That's
assiettes.
my panty waist
Des
sugar.
hommes sont des hommes.
By the way, how is your father?
But I want to know, does it bother you?
To the Break Room Classic Film fans, it's tea time for a coffee break. Welcome back to the coffee house. I hope you have whatever it is that you're drinking. I have my coffee, so we're going to jump into this week's Fashion Friday Cinema Coffee. I'm going to try to keep this 10 minutes or less, maybe 15. If you are new to the coffee house, because I had a lot of subscriptions this week, I thank you so much. Welcome. Gather around the table, come on in. The door is open. If you need to place an order for whatever beverage you drink, just hit pause and we will wait for you until you're ready to go. And if my hair looks shorter, it's not. I roller set it, so it's like really tightly bound. This is bothering me. Please continue to share the coffee house out loud, subscribe, hit the like button, retweet on your Twitter page or any social media outlet that you have, share with friends, family. And remember, when you share it, tag me and I will retweet it or repost it on my Twitter account or my Instagram account. Instagram. I don't know. I can't. Instagram and I don't know. We are not the best of friends, but I do what I can. If it wasn't for the stories in a new account that I'm following that I'm so interested in, it's like, I don't know. Because some of those comments are like, into our Fashion Friday Cinema Coffee. I do have some things with me I want to share with you guys, so I'm sort of using it as a coffee table for my coffee for the time being. This week, I am showcasing the garment. It was sort of like my Myrna Loy dresses, the two dresses I brought you guys a few weeks back. And I was waiting each week like for the best opportunity, like, okay, so again, like I said with the Myrna Loy garment, it's now here. It is here. This is inspired by The Awful Truth with Irene Dunn. It's a pant garment. If you are familiar with The Awful Truth, I think you may know the pant garment I'm referring to, the one with the train in the back, what I call like a train, the draping of the pant in the back. It is very simple. It's all very simple. Okay, if you're part of my script reading group, you know where that comes from. It was very simple. I saw it, I liked it, I created it. I mean, it was like 1, 2, 3. It was a no-brainer. The garment that Irene Dunn wears was created by Robert Kalluk. I'm sure you are familiar with that name if you read the credits or if you are a classic film fan, which I'm thinking most all of us here are. If you are new to the classic film community, welcome. That's what we're here to do, to help spread love of classic cinema and cinema in general to everyone. He may seem familiar from films such as 20th Century, You'll Never Get Rich, which we talked about, You'll Never Get Lovelier last week with Irene. You'll Never Get Rich, Random Harvest, Mrs. Miniver, Johnny Eager, H.M. Pullum Esquire with Hedy Lamarr and Robert Young. I love that film. I have such a soft spot for that film if you haven't seen it. Mr. and Mrs. North with Gracie without George. Just call me Gracie. Everybody calls me Gracie. And probably most known, It Happened One Night. And dressing actresses such as Ida Lupino, Mary Astor, and if you haven't seen Alexa Foreman's, shout out to Alexa Foreman's documentary on Mary Astor's scandal, The Purple Diaries. I highly recommend that you watch that to have a really good, detailed insight into the Purple Diaries, as they're known with Mary Astor. If you are a Mary Astor fan, if you're a classic film fan, I highly encourage that you watch that. But dressing stars like Glenda Farrell, Babs, Joan Bennett, Constance Bennett's sister. So it's again another wide variety of stars and film. This particular piece, as I said, when I saw it, I fell in love with it. For me, The Awful Truth came after My Favorite Wife. My Favorite Wife was the first film that I saw of the three that Cary Grant and Irene Dunn did together. They did The Awful Truth, My Favorite Wife, and Penny Serenade. If you haven't seen, there's so many recommendations I have for you guys today. If you haven't seen Penny Serenade, please please do that. It's such, I wasn't expecting that. I guess because I had come off of My Favorite Wife and it being such a funny comedy, that Penny Serenade, I wasn't expecting that, but it was a pleasant, although emotional ride. I highly encourage you watching that film if you have not seen that already. But The Awful Truth for me, I want to say it came last. It's kind of hard to remember because it's been such a long time, but I know for sure it was My Favorite Wife that I saw first, but I think The Awful Truth came last of the three that I saw with them together. I think because it all happened sort of in quick successions, like 1, 2, 3 punch. And I have a coffee confession, since we are cinema coffeeing. Yes, that is a word. That is a word we have created here a few weeks back. Since we were cinema coffeeing, I have a coffee confession that I'm pretty sure people are going to hit the stop button and back away and leave the coffee house when I admit this out loud. I hate to say this out loud. Gosh, I can't believe, okay, I'm just gonna say it. For me personally, I actually love My Favorite Wife. I hate to even say out loud, more than The Awful Truth, because I love The Awful Truth. And I guess what I will say before I go any further, before tomatoes are thrown at me, I don't know if it's because I saw My Favorite Wife first, and you know how that goes when you see a film before something else and that one seems to resonate with you more, you seem to have more of a connection with. But I will say that The Awful Truth has grown to a level, how I feel about My Favorite Wife as I do now with the Awful Truth. Although I loved The Awful Truth right out of the bat. And you know, the funny thing is, because I'm always sharing my cinema coffees, which I created to share my love of cinema with you guys, and how I shared my love with cinema with my mom. So my cinema coffees were birthed out of sharing for my mom, which I hashtag films and movie connections that she and I had. We were avid film goers. We watched cinema, like I told you guys, every Saturday night was our movie nights for like over 12 years. The memory stretches back a really long time. Really, The Awful Truth is more of a mom and I film, because we would quote from that film all the time. Her favorite part in it is at the end with Irene Dunn, where she's, well, not the end, but toward the end, when she's going into her burlesque dance. Like, that was my mom's favorite part, you know, from the Gone with the Wind, from the nightclub scene earlier in the film. And we would always quote the, you know, you go your way, I go my way. Like, we'd always pick a good moment to quote that and use that very often. And yet for me, like, it was My Favorite Wife. But I think because that one's kind of my own, and I have watched My Favorite Wife so many times. As I told you guys, I can repeat watch the heck out of something if I am in love with it. And My Favorite Wife, I can quote from beginning to end everyone's character, but usually I just stick with Irene Dunn. And you know, my favorite time to watch My Favorite Wife is like at night, when I've gotten into the bed, because I love going into scene with, how long does it take to tell a woman my wife's come back? I could say it in 2 seconds. My wife's come back. You've had 2 days. So I love going into that bedroom scene with Irene Dunn and Cary Grant. I loved their chemistry together. And you know what? I revisited some Greer Garson interviews where she's talking about Walter Pidgeon, and it always makes me like fill with joy when I hear her talking about him. And it really made me think, my favorite on-screen couple, I think I've told you guys this, my favorite on-screen couple is Sophia Loren and Marcello Mastroianni. But it also, I love Myrna Loy and William Powell together. I think everyone does. I love seeing Walter Pidgeon and Greer Garson together. And I love seeing Cary Grant and Irene Dunn together. And something that makes me feel like a warm feeling. Have you ever stopped to think that, you know, love affair, we talked about this a few weeks ago with Charles Boyer and Irene Dunn, 1939, and then is remade later with Cary Grant and Deborah Kerr with An Affair to Remember. And then you think, like, you stop and think about it and you're like, wait, like Cary Grant and Irene Dunne were like an on-screen couple. I love Charles Boyer in Love Affair. Not that Cary Grant wouldn't have been good in that film. I am glad that we get Charles Boyer and Irene Dunne together in Love Affair, but it's just like that kind of connection, and both of them directed by Leo McCarey. For The Awful Truth, Leo McCarey won for Best Director, an Oscar, and Ralph Bellamy wins his only performing Oscar for The Awful Truth. Getting back to the piece, I created it for a 1930s show that I had written. For that show, for the most part, all of the clothes were inspired by just the decade in general, the 30s, but I wanted a few pieces that were specifically from a film, specifically from an actor in a film. And I'm going to put my coffee down for 1 second, just to add that extra glue, that extra fabric to the show itself, for the wardrobe of the show itself. And I even have the script with me that I had brought with me for the show, that I had written it for. How it works for me, like what my process is. I have a fitting, and I try to make sure that I don't have multiple people at one fitting. I try to do it one person at a time. Being on that other end, auditioning for things, I know how it is, and to have, you know, more than one person at a fitting, you just don't want to do that. You want to make people feel as comfortable as possible. And what really did it for me when I knew this piece was going to work, the person that I chose to wear it, she never asked any questions about like how am I going to wear this. Like when she saw that how long the train was on the pant legs in the back, she didn't ask any questions. She didn't like, should I swing around? I mean, when she walked around, did her movements just to see how it was going to work on stage, she never missed a step. She never tripped. She never questioned like, am I supposed to walk on it? Because if you notice Irene Dunne in The Awful Truth, she's not questioning anything. Her movements are flawless, even with all that's going on when Cary Grant, and she's trying to manage Cary Grant with the dog, which of course, you know, the dog Skippy, which is Asta, it has his big moment in The Awful Truth during that scene. So she's managing all that and still rocking the pants. I mean, that's exactly what I was looking for who I chose to wear this piece. And for this show, this had to be the one show that I really wanted to carry on the road. Like I wanted to do like a touring show with that. Outlined it out how it was going to work. I guess maybe I was just like really into the 42nd Street, the Footlight Parade outlook on traveling shows, you know, like with the traveling prologues. But that's one show that I really wanted to branch out and do a traveling show with it. You know, things get put on the back burner, and you never come back to them. But I don't know, I guess with everything in quarantine or everything at stay at home, and you can't, it's like you're itching to like, whenever I get the opportunity again, I'm going to do that. So I don't know, who knows. I really enjoyed creating that show. I enjoyed the enthusiasm around that show. I think that's why I wanted to travel with it. It's fun to communicate with other classic film fans and other classic film lovers, but it's even more of a reward when someone who isn't as versed in classic cinema and they are interested. Because I remember telling one of the actors in the show that there was something Garbo-esque that I wanted to create around her character, around her performance, and was asking like, are you familiar with Greta Garbo? She's like, I know the name, I've heard the name, but I'm not really versed on her. I don't really know much about her, but the name for sure I have heard. And to see the next rehearsal when she came to me and she was like already beaming and smiling, and she was like, yeah, I spent the night just Googling Greta Garbo, and what I wanted to go for the look for her was the Matahari. I know it sounds cliche, but my favorite session of Greta Garbo in photos is Matahari. That slick back look is my favorite look from Greta Garbo. As a matter of fact, I have that on a scrapbook. Maybe next week I'll bring my scrapbook so I can show you guys. On the cover of my scrapbook, I have that photo on it, and you may have seen it in the background of some pictures that I have posted in the past. but I saw that in a magazine one day and I almost screamed. I was like, oh my gosh, because I love that session so much, and I cut it out and I used that as part of my scrapbook cover. But that was the look that I was going for with her, and she was like, I looked her up, and like she was amazing. Like she didn't take a bad photo. So things like that, it's like score, like we've got another one. We've got another one on our side. And something that I love about Robert Calick's work, it still is identifiable when you see it in a film. You know who it is. There's something about it that you know that was him. He has his print on this. He has his signature on this. And for some reason, for me, it happened one night. The suit dress that Claudette wears, that she's in the majority of the film when she's on the bus ride with Clark Gable, for some reason made me think of the top that Irene Dunne wears in The Awful Truth. Now here's one thing. For The Awful Truth, the blouse that Irene Dunne has on in it is phenomenal. I think I loved it almost as much as the pants. And whenever I create a piece, I'm not doing it to be a replica or verbatim. I'm doing it to pick something out of it that I like and then work around it to be more of an inspired piece or an influenced piece, not a replica piece. When I'm speaking of Irene Dunne, I thought of a book that I don't know if you guys can see it, Hollywood Movie Steals. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. So this is a book that I have. It has some really, really amazing photo steals in it. And I mean, really, really amazing photo stills in it. But there was something that I wanted to share with you guys when talking about Irene Dunne. It says Irene Dunne was one of the actresses who did not enjoy posing and refused to discuss this aspect of her career when giving interviews. And I just found that fascinating to read when I did read this book because I love looking up photos of classic Hollywood actors, and she's just flat out telling you, I don't like this process. One of my favorite photos of Irene Dunne, although I do have a few, one of my favorite photos is a publicity shot that she did for The Awful Truth. You know, the dress and you know the fur, like, you know, the trimmings that she has on. That is one of my favorite, and actually it was used for a Now Playing Guide. I miss the Now Playing Guides so much. I used to love getting those in the mail and like picking my favorite ones and framing them. I really miss those, but that was one of my favorite covers because it had her in that pose on the cover of the Now Playing Guide. So that's one of my favorite photos of Irene Dunne, but she did not like doing photo shoots. So that's just something I thought interesting to take away, because there's a lot of beautiful images. Hedy Lamarr, so yeah, that's one of my favorite. Betty Davis, Kate Francis, and this is actually the suit that I was talking about right here. So there we go with Claudette Colbert. So from It Happened One Night, but I don't know, something about it just reminds me of The Awful Truth. You know, before I leave with my favorite wife, I do have a question for you guys, because you know how you say, I've never met someone who, and then you meet someone. I've always liked the idea of Cary Grant and Irene Dunne, you know, ending up together. I guess spoiler alert, because I don't do spoilers, but in this case, this is more like the women question with who is your Steven. But I never minded with Irene Dunne that Irene Dunne and Cary Grant are together, like end up together in that film. It never bothered me. And then someone was like, they hated that Gail Patrick was left out in the cold like that, like that he chose Irene Dunne over Gail Patrick. And after I tried to tell them they were wrong, like I really did try to look at that with an open mind. I've seen it so many times. I thought it was going to be really hard for me to see it unbiased, because I'm just like, no, but that's an on-screen couple. They belong together. And I think because we're so used to seeing Gail Patrick in that typecast, other woman type role like My Man Godfrey, it is a breath of fresh air. For me, I love to see it when it plays out differently, just like with Claudia and David, which is one of my favorite films. And though she just has a bit part, there's nothing backstabbing about her. That she's just playing a straight, honest character. She's just playing the sister, or rather sister-in-law. But I loved her character in that. And if you have not, I told you I'm going to have so many recommendations, Dave. If you have not seen Claudia and David, which is a follow-up to Claudia, I have done a Cinema Coffee piece on that. I will have that linked below, 1943. It is one of the films that I think I most connect with as regard to mother and daughter relationship. Well, I was able to watch that film with my mom, and she even said the same thing. She said, I can't go through that film anymore. It is almost like a one-time watch, although I do have it. But Claudia and David, I do watch more often because I'm able to get through that one. Let me know because I did try to watch it again with that in mind, with My Favorite Wife, and I can see like it is kind of bad. Like, I can't see that point of view. I can't say that I agree with it. I can't say that I don't want Irene Dunne and Cary Grant to be together, but I was able to really see that other point of view. And personally, I like Gail Patrick. She and I share the same birthday, Team Gemini. So I personally like Gail Patrick. So let me know what you think. If you did feel sorry for Gail Patrick or thought maybe that would have been like a whole different movie entirely, which we know My Favorite Wife is based off of a story. And there are also other renditions of it, also with Doris Day, Polly Bergen, and then in the Gail Patrick role, and James Garner. So there are, and then Marilyn Monroe. I wasn't going to get into all the adaptations done on it, the spins on it, and then there's the Jean Arthur film where it's Fred MacMurray and Melvyn Douglas. So there's a lot of variations out there. My Favorite Wife just happens to be my favorite personal one, and I think the reason I love Too Many Husbands, the one with Jean Arthur, because it is it's a flip take on it with the two men. Like, she's having fight over her versus the other way around. So I do like that one too, and I love Jean Arthur and Fred MacMurray and Melvyn Douglas. So that made for a good cast. If you don't have The Awful Truth on Criterion, please do that. Highly recommend that purchase as well. And then I have my Favorite Wife on DVD, and I love both of them. Although My Favorite Wife, that's just standard DVD. Both of them have the old time radio adaptations of the films. And if you know me, you know, like, old time radio, that's my jam. I used to create old time radio shows once a week. I would write them out once a week, and I would upload them on YouTube. I would do them with my friends on YouTube, because I was heavily inspired by old time radio growing up. My dad, he talked about old time radio so much that that was fascinating to me. Like, you mean they just talked through the radio, and your imagination just goes, it wraps around you, really. So when he saw that my love for it was growing, he started me off with a box set, which I have shared on my social media page. He started me off with that. It included Abbott and Costello. It included Jack Benny, Charlie McCarthy, which was my favorite one. I think from that one, and Richard Diamond. That was actually how I was introduced to Dick Powell. It was through Richard Diamond. That is what really kickstarted me into putting them on. Like I would wait till the folks left, take out the family camera and set it up in the living room, and I would act it out, because I listened to them so much that I'm sure some people may be able to relate to this. I listened to them so much that I was able to memorize all the dialogue, everyone's parts. So I would turn on the camera, and I started acting them out to be like little dramas or little comedy sketches, just going along with the old time radio. I loved old time radio so much, and then I was like, hey, let's turn this love into something creative, and I created A Day in the Life of Hollywood 1930s, 40s, and 50s. And I was actually able to put on that show. I was invited to put on that show for a college that was opening up their first semester here locally. So I was able to do that, and we did A Day in the Life of. And I had to let them know, though, at the beginning of the show, before we even started, that although I do love old time radio, it is definitely a creative and imaginative pastime that, unfortunately, because of the era, because of the time, blacks on radio in that, you know, George and Gracie or Fibber McGee and Molly, or it just, that just wasn't, it was just a sign of the times. That just wasn't something common or heard of. But I do give a lot of credit to Maxine Sullivan. I celebrate her any way I can, every way I can. I did even highlight her in the show because her and her husband were one of the first Blacks to have their own show on old time radio, and so I'm always championing her. So don't be surprised if you see some reposts on that this week. She's one of my favorite singers, period, but that she's able to do that just as Hazel Scott was able to do that on the telly. She was one of the first Blacks to have her own telly show in the 50s. So anytime I can campaign for them, I'm there. But for next week, I also want to hear from you guys to do a coffee house interaction. Let me know what piece you would like for me to bring for you guys next week. I had planned on doing my flapper collection in my wardrobe closet. I usually work from the middle and branch out. And when I got to the side, on the left-hand side, because I sort of have it broken down in category by decade. So it starts with early period on the left-hand side. I saw my flapper collection and I was like, I need a follow-up topper with that, but there was no way. I needed to get Irene done. I needed to stick her in there, but I'm gonna let you guys decide. I can go ahead and do the flapper collection for you guys next week, or my Betty Boop dress. That's another garment that I've been itching to showcase, or my Cyd Charisse dress. Or if you just want something that's just out of the closet, that's not specifically inspired by or influenced by a particular actor or a particular film, just with classic Hollywood in general, or some of my pieces that are just pieces. They weren't really inspired by anything but my own imagination. Let me know, and I'll also have those options below, and I'll post them on social media. And whichever one gets the most play, the most clicks on, like you guys want to see, that's the one I'm gonna bring for you next week. So that's it for this Fashion Friday. I hope you guys are safe, well, healthy, staying home. And if you're a part of my script reading group, I will see you back here early next week. If you are a part of just the Cinema Coffee Fashion Friday group, I will see you next Friday. No matter which side that you're on, I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend as best as you can under the circumstances. Until next week, be safe, be well, stay healthy, stay home, and I'll see you next week. Love you too. Hopefully when I edit this, I'm gonna clock in under at least 15 minutes, hopefully under 15 minutes.
I never could do that.